Hi everyone. Today we are going to learn the poem Digging written by Seamus Heaney. Digging is a narrative poem and was first published in 1966 from his poetry collection Death of a Naturalist. The poem is about the speaker's family tradition. It explains the importance of respect and hard work coupled with the family tradition. Let us see about the author Seamus Heaney. Seamus Justin Heaney was an Irish poet, playwright, translator, and lecturer, and the recipient of 1995 Nobel Prize in Literature. He was born near Castile-on-Son, Northern Ireland. The family moved to nearby Pelagi when he was a boy. Heaney became a lecturer in Belfast in the early 1960s after attending university there and began to publish poetry. He was also the professor of poetry at Oxford and won a Lifetime Recognition Award from the Griffin Trust. His literary papers are held by the National Library of Ireland. Let us see the poem Digging. Between my finger and my thumb, the squat pen rests snug as a gun. Under my window, a clean rasping sound when the spade sinks into gravelly ground. My father digging. I look down till his straining ramp among the flower beds bends low, comes up 20 years away, stooping in rhythm through potato drills where he was digging. The coarse boot nestled on the lug, the shaft against the inside knee was levered firmly. He rooted out tall tops, buried the bright edge deep, to scatter new potatoes that we picked, loving their cool hardness in our hands. By God, the old man could handle a spade just like his old man. My grandfather cut more turf in a day than any other man on Toner's bog. Once I carried him milk in a bottle corked slowly with paper. He straightened up to drink it, then fell to right away, nicking and slicing neatly, heaving swords over his shoulder, going down and down for the good turf digging. The cold smell of potato mold, the squelch and slap of soggy peat, the cuts of an edge. True living roots awaken in my head, but I have no spade to follow men like them. Between my finger and my thumb, the squat pen rests, I will dig with it. Let us see the summary or the paraphrase of digging. Between my finger and my thumb, the squat pen rests snug as a gun. What this mean? The raised pen in my hand and it feels like a gun. That means the pen fits perfectly and comfortably in his hand just as a gun would fit in his hand. Here, the meaning of squat is short and thickest in body. At the same time, the meaning of snug is very tight. So, it says that poet holds a pen quite very tightly and comfortably holds us like a gun. Under my window, a clean rasping sound. When the spade sinks into gravelly ground, my father digging, I look down. It means when the poet is busy with his pen, some sound from outside disturbed him a lot, and what is that means? Someone outside is digging using a spade or shovel and it is making a rasping sound when it cuts into the earth. Probably shovel makes a horrible grating sound when it enters the ground because the shovel is skimming against lots of tiny stones that make up the gravelly ground. So he looked out from his window and found that that was done by his father. So he says that when he was busy with his pen paused upon his paper as he heard the sound from window. Till his training ramp among the flower beds, bends low, comes up 20 years away, stooping in rhythm through potato drills where he was digging. When the speaker watches from the window as his dad bends, digging among the flower beds, the father seems to be working pretty hard. He is training after all. When the speaker dads come from his gardening crouch or the position or the squatting from the garden, the speaker imagines him 20 years away, which we take to mean 20 years ago. So, what was happening 20 years ago in our speaker's mind? Means his father was digging potatoes. That's what potato drills. By the way, or evenly spaced rows of potatoes in a field. The act of drilling into the earth to make a hole in which you plant the potato seems the rhythm of father bending and rising in his garden has sparked this flashback. This follows the same pattern like potato drills, dipping down into the ground, then coming back up. The coarse boot nestled on the lug, the shaft against the knees, inside knee was levered firmly. Here, the meaning of lug is flattened edge of the spade blade. The coarse boot belongs to the father and it is probably coarse because it is a beat up old work boot. A lug refers to the top of the blade of the spade which sticks out on either side of the shaft or handle. Stepping on the lug and putting all your weight on it helps sink the tool into the ground so you can dig your hole. When he says the shaft is levered firmly on the inside of his father's knee, it just means that he has got a good hold on it. So he won't lose his balance when he digs the spade into the earth. Till now, we have seen many tools like pen, gun, and spade. So, this poem might deeply concerned with work and the tools it takes to get that work done. He rooted out tall tops, buried the bright edge deep to scatter new potatoes that we picked. He rooted up tall tops. He refers to father and we are still in that memory from 20 years ago, which we can tell because the speaker is still using past tense. The speaker's old man is still working on the potato drill. Rooted out means he found the potato tops by digging them up. The bright edge is the edge of the shovel's blade, and our speaker probably calls it bright because it is made of some sort of metal, as most spades are. To scatter new potatoes that we picked, loving their cool hardness in our hands. Here in these lines, our speaker was talking about his father as if he were alone, or look like the father and son are doing this work together, or else at least the son is hanging around while the father works. Loving their cool hardness in our hands. The cool hardness here refers to the way the potato feels when it is pulled from the earth, almost like a rock. Here, the speaker is talking about the way something feels in his hand. This time, instead of pen, he feels like it is a potato. By God, the old man could handle a spade just like his old man. Here we should notice two things. That is, it seems our speaker's father was really good at digging up these potatoes, and apparently his grandfather was not too shabby in the fields either. The speaker seems to think the ability to work with one's hand is a good thing. He is paying his father and grandfather a compliment through these lines. By God is an exclamation in order to grab our attention and shows us just how much enthusiasm and admiration our speaker has for his father and grandfather's skill. Not only does work seem important to our speaker, but also tradition too, or work as part of the family tradition. He comes from a long line of diggers and he feels pretty proud about the profession or the tradition and the family skill. My grandfather cut more turf in a day than any other man on Tunis bog. Here, our speaker is trying to reach even further back into the family history to the time when his grandfather dug for turf and evidently was very good at it. From the lines, a bog is a patch of wet, muddy ground covered in peat or turf which forms the grassy top layer. Here, the work of peat is nothing but the peat makes for a great fuel and fertilizer. So, Irishmen used to harvest the peat by cutting it from the bog and saving it for later use. Tunis bog. Of course, we have not heard of it, and for all we know, it is entirely made up. But it is a specific place, a local place, and its mention of it gives the poem an insider feel. In other words, the speaker seems to be addressing those to the people who are familiar with the traditions of potato farming and peat harvesting. We should note that the grandfather is digging neither for flowers nor for potatoes. He is digging for peat. So, Instead of decoration or food, he is digging for fuel. Once I carried him milk in a bottle, corked sloppily with paper. He straightened up. Here, the speaker recalls the memories with his grandfather now, and he is probably quite young in this memory. It looks like the speaker takes him fresh milk with paper shoved in the top as a stopper while his grandfather works in the bog. And his grandfather takes a brief break from all his hard work to have a sip. Here, one thing tells us that this is an old memory. It is from a long time ago when something like a paper cork was not unheard. These lines create a small subtle connection between the grandfather's work, that is, peat harvesting, and the work our speaker ends up doing, that is, writing. And he feels like what he has to contribute to this tradition of work. To drink it, then fell to right away, nicking and slicing neatly, heaving swords. These lines clearly says that the grandfather certainly does the work with a great skill, but he only allows himself a quick break before getting right back to business. Heaney describes how he cuts into the ground with his spade, nicking and slicing neatly. It seems as though it is not just hard labor but takes a good amount of technique too. The grandfather's technique and efficiency are similar to what we saw from the father earlier in the poem. Over his shoulder, going down and down for the good turf digging. These lines say that the grandfather is continuing to toil away in Toner's bog, chucking the turf over his shoulder as he goes. The good turf he is after is the nutrient rich turf that is good for using as fuel or fertilizer. And here, the way Heaney puts it, down and down, means his grandfather is digging and digging, always digging. Both the father and the grandfather seem to be pretty hardworking, tough men, and these lines continue to emphasize that fact by calling our attention to the grandfather's constant effort. The cold smell of potato mold, the squelch and slap of soggy peat, the curt cuts of an edge. These lines talks about the smells and sounds of digging for potatoes and peat. He brings up the smell of potato mold, the sounds of the peat bog, and the cuts of the spade as it digs down into the earth. Usually, we associate hot or cold with our touch sense, but here the cold smell, probably because it is pretty darn cold in Ireland. So because of that reason, he may compare it, the potato is having a cold smell. Through living roots awaken in my head. What does this line says? This line has a whole lot more going on below the surface. Of course, he is talking literally about the roots of a plant, flowers, potatoes, etc. The speaker is talking about father and grandfather's work as in origins or hereditary or tradition. They are living roots because the memories are alive in him, our speaker, as he watches his father in the flower bed. But I have no spade to follow men like them. Till now, we have been reading about the father and the grandfather and all their tireless digging. But here we turn in a different direction. This shows that how much he admires his father and grandfather. So, we can clearly understand that it would be easy for us to assume that the speaker would follow in their footsteps and become a digger too. But the speaker is not like his father or his grandfather because he does not have the proper tool for digging. It is all in the tools, it turns out. So, without a spade, our speaker is not a potato farmer or a peat harvester. He is something different entirely. While at first we thought our speaker was a part of his family's tradition, we are now seeing him as a bit of different or outsider, but we are still not sure why. But my finger and my thumb, the squat pen rest, I will dig with it. Till now, the speaker circles all the way back to where he started and repeats the first two lines of the poem. In doing so, he manages to show he is following in the tradition of his father and grandfather. He is just using a different tool and a different method, while his dad and grandpa dug with spades, our speaker plans to dig with his pen. When Heaney writes, I will dig with it, we see that our speaker is different from his father and grandfather in what and how he digs. But he is also similar in that he is trying to get to the bottom or unearth certain things too. And just as his father and grandfather dig down into the earth, perhaps our speaker wants to dig down into his past, his roots, to give proper recognition to awesome men like his elders. The last lines of the poem shows how the speaker carries on the tradition of work and digging in his own work, different as it may be. This is about the poem Digging. If you have a look at the themes of the poem, identity, admiration, respect, and hard work. These three are the notable themes of this poem. The poem presents the speaker's identity in contrast with his ancestors. The speaker is happy that he has received the talent of digging from his family. First, he discusses the accomplishments and untiring efforts of his father and grandfather. And then he provides a graphic description of the tools they used to prepare their fields. However, the poet's tool is his pen, that helps him dig into his memory and family history. The poet has beautifully explored his relationship with his family legacy using his pen and expertise. Although his ancestors have not done anything great, he finds greatness in their untiring work and he shows great respect for them and acknowledges that he was inherited the skill of digging from them. He tells that his ancestors used garden tools and he uses his intellectual power. So, hope students you all understood the poem Digging. Thank you.